It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. It's snowy. It's cold. And the storm isn't just raging out in the atmosphere. You know, normally I try to choose and pick things to talk about that are going to shed light on what's happening in the news. And I'll introduce stories as we go. But I think this morning one of the things that I want to talk about is the fact that we've been working here and trying for a very long time to change the paradigm, to change the scenario, to change the way things operate. And I think we're missing, to a certain extent, the point of how we're supposed to move forward. In other words, we are allowing others to set the rules by which we operate. And those rules are not designed for our benefit. They're not designed to enable us to be more functional, to be more in control of our own destiny, of our own self-governance. Those rules are designed by people who seek to extend and control and look forward to their own growth, their own power, their own improvement. And we see, you know, a lot of, well, I should say we're given a lot of information by a media that really truly doesn't represent our interests. They are no longer educating us about what's going on around us in the world. They've now become, if you will, a propaganda arm for this administration. And it's not just limited to this administration, folks. This has been going on for a really long time. I mean, the government tells a story. They give it to the media. The media regurgitates it like vomit. But their ability to be independent journalists, to be focused on the truth, to go out there and dig a little deeper and make sure that what they're telling you is the truth, has been lost. There's very, very few left. You know, there's an article this morning about in the Free Beacon called "Dirty Pool," and I posted it up on our site. It's on our Facebook page, and I'll put it in the subject area here in this video. But this article clarifies exactly what I'm speaking about when I reference that the media has become this, you know, this sycophantic reiterator of what the government wants you to hear. They act more like a ministry of propaganda than they do investigative journalists who are independent and actually seeking to tell you the truth. In fact, a good many of them have actually been absorbed into the collective of this administration. Now, that happens in every administration. These people in power seek people who have influence to join their ranks, to utilize that influence to propel their message forward. And unfortunately, many of them, especially now, I mean, because the numbers are unprecedented in terms of how many journalists have joined this administration. I think it's 22 now. And they peddle stories hoping to be the next ex-journalist invited to join the administration and the inner circle. You see, when it comes to true investigative journalism, there aren't many left. And those that are quickly being marginalized. I put a story up this morning about Cheryl Atkinson. You know, she has been extraordinarily effective in the past. And she is one of the few that has come out and indicated that she's very unhappy about what's happening with the idea of the journalism or the lack thereof in journalism. And the truth is that when you look at where we are today in terms of the lessons that we get about what's happening around us, you have to realize that there aren't any more people truthfully giving us the inside story about where things are, what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to look at what's happening around us. And yet the evidence is everywhere. The evidence surrounding us is really so obvious to anyone who's willing to truthfully look at it. And you know, there's a problem with humanity, folks. And that problem is real simple. People don't want to admit they're wrong. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. People don't want to admit they've made a mistake. And those people who were, you know, the loudest or the most vociferous or the most dedicated about their position in the support of this particular president, in the support of some of the things he's done, like the Obamacare project and many others that have come before. At this point, you know, they can't not stand and admit to themselves, much less to the people that are their circle of influence, who they worked hard to influence, but incorrectly, that they've been wrong. In other words, at this stage in the game, in order for them to go back and repudiate the ideas that they pushed forth to those people in their circle of influence, their family, their friends, the people that they go work with, the people at church, when they supported President Obama, when they put that bumper sticker on the back of the car. Now, in order to recognize and acknowledge that they've made a mistake, that they were taken in, they cannot do it. They don't have the courage and the internal fortitude to say, you know what? I made a mistake, and I encouraged you to follow my lead and make a mistake with me. Because they don't want to lose credibility. Human beings, as a general rule, will not admit a mistake, especially when it's hurt someone else. And we're talking, folks, about a serious problem. I mean, when we look at this issue surrounding Obamacare, look, you have to admit, it's obvious to anyone that we are no longer talking here about anything that was intended to be what it was pretended to be, right? I mean, it's really quite simple. Obamacare was never designed to be a true free market system that would benefit everyone with health care. But that's what it was sold as. It is and will become the newest massive entitlement system that we have ever seen. The truth is, it's going to collapse under its own weight. And even when it does collapse, the mitigation solution that they're going to have to come up with for all the people that have signed on, and by the way, the numbers are staggering. Right now, it's 8-1 who are on Medicaid. 8-1. In other words, for everyone who's paying, 8 people are signing up who can't pay a penny. They don't have 2 nickels to rub together. They don't have a pot to pee in nor a window to throw it out of. And they're signing up in droves because for them it's something for nothing. But the people who are actually going to have to pay for this are not signing up. The youth is turning away in droves. They are rejecting this president, and they are rejecting the premise that they should capitulate and contribute to the benefit of the whole. Because they see it for what it is. It's a sham. And this will collapse. And when it does, when the doctors refuse to participate, when the young people refuse to sign up, all those millions of people who have signed up, who were on Medicaid and are now receiving government subsidies, what are we going to do with them? We're going to have to come up with some kind of a strategy that says, well, everyone who did sign up, now we can't take it away from you because we never take away entitlement and welfare programs, ever. And that's the hook, folks. That's the hook in the fish's mouth. Those people who are signing up for Medicaid, who are actually not truly poverty-stricken, but have the semblance to afford some insurance, but because of the way they've played these games with, you can be 400% of the poverty level in order to qualify for some level of subsidy, then you get pushed into the Medicaid rolls. Do you realize that under the Medicaid rolls, that everything that you own, all the equity that you have in your home, if you own one, it's no longer yours. When you sign up for Medicaid, and I don't know why no one in the press is talking about this. They refuse to. And you can't tell me they don't know. You can't tell me that not one investigative journalist has sat down and done the homework on this. I'm not a trained journalist. I'm just a concerned American patriot who says there's something desperately wrong here. And I know this. So how can they not? When you sign up and they push you onto Medicaid because you fall underneath the threshold of income level, which is 400% of poverty, you will lose access to your own resources. Have you ever heard the phrase that, and you may have heard this over time, people who are going to go on to Medicaid rolls when they're elderly, as an example, they get their assets out of their name. They give them away to their kids, or they sell the house to their family to try to keep it from being taken by the government. You're no different. The truth is that when you sign up for Obamacare and you fall underneath the Medicaid roll, that subsidy you think you're getting is going to eviscerate any equity, any asset value, any resources that you have. When you go to sell your home 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now, someone from Medicaid is going to be standing there waiting to receive the check, the equity check that you thought you were going to walk away from or walk away with. There is no such thing, ladies and gentlemen, as a free lunch. And yet this government is promoting free lunch to everyone. Free phones, free food, free welfare, free rent. These new dependents, the new health welfare enrollees, or I think we should start calling them the health fare. This is health fare. And they're going to have to stay on the government dole. There'll be new dependents, newly minted, completely and totally and utterly enslaved. There'll be new co-opted, willing slaves who will do whatever it takes to, quote, keep the plan they're on, as long as it's paid for by you. The truth is that the young people in this country are starting to realize the error of their ways. And it's time that America stopped believing what we've been taught, what we've been told. We have been submerged beneath a deluge of propaganda and misrepresentation, untruth, lies. You're told that you only have respect if you're a good tax-paying citizen, if you do your part, if you sign up and do as you're told and participate in health care. Truth is, if you look at it from its real perspective, you've been told to do that at the point of a gun. The penalty, while minimized this year, should have alarm bells going off in your mind. Well, it's only $95. This year it's only $95. Next year it's 1.5% of your income. And it grows. You see, the truth is that we have been told that we should always do what we're told. And we're continuing to do that. And it's a mistake. And it's a mistake of mammoth proportion. Because what we're doing is we're allowing the tone, we're allowing ourselves to be couched, to be set. Instead of being independent, instead of having self-governance, instead of being self-reliant and self-responsible, over the last 50 or 60 years, we have been so beaten by this mantra of government is here to save you, to be your salvation, your savior. And that government will do it for you. You know, human beings are naturally, to a certain extent, somewhat lazy. I mean, as a general rule, if given the opportunity to sit back and do nothing, there's a significant percentage of the human race that will do exactly that, as long as someone else is going to wait on them hand and foot, irrespective of how self-reliant they've been in their lives before. These people who are on endless unemployment, they've become a slave to that unemployment check. They've actually altered their lifestyle to account for their new lower level of income. They've changed the direction their life's ship was heading in. They've turned the rudder. And they've now adapted to this new low, the new lowest common denominator. They're comfortable with their feet up on the ottoman. And I get it. You know, I don't have a lot of money to spend on extracurricular things, but I've got a free phone and my utilities are paid. I get a check every month or twice a month for my unemployment. I got welfare. I've got an EBT card. Hey, with all due respect, I ask you to take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, why don't you just commit a crime and go to prison? You get all those things there too. The truth is that what we've allowed to go down in our nation is really going to be the end game for us. And we're giving up our pride. And we're giving up our self-respect. And we're giving up our self-esteem. The true stuff, the real stuff, not that ribbon that every kid gets that says, you know, you're a hero because they made the end of the race. Not that kind. The real kind. The kind that when you look in the mirror, you say, I'm worthwhile. I've accomplished something. I've done something. I've been able to survive and not only survive, but I've been able to improve. I've done good things. I've earned this. It's mine. I worked hard for it. And I'm entitled to it because I earned it, not because someone said I'm entitled to something for nothing. You know, we're very close to where we were in the 1920s. You've heard of the Roaring '20s. Well, none of us were alive, so none of us were there to remember it. But the truth is, and those that are alive, by the way, are too old to have remembered the real heyday of it. They remember the net result, but ultimately they don't remember the real heyday. Money was cheap. Morals were low. Ethics were non-existent. There was no integrity. There was no honor. Everybody was playing the game. And it all came crashing down. In 1929, the stock market crashed. The unemployment was at unprecedented levels, had never before been reached in the United States of America. People stood with their entire families in a soup line, just waiting for a free meal. because there was no work. You know, there's an article out there on Freedom Outpost this morning, and I've posted it up on our website, but I'd like to go over some highlights of it. It says America should take a lesson from the Ukrainians, demanding the resignation of a Russian-friendly president. The Orange Revolution, which is the Ukrainians who have gathered in the city, in their capital city of Kiev, they have been protesting their government's decision to align itself with Russia instead of the Europe and the European Union. The government has agreed to align themselves with Russia on trade and different association agreements. And the people said, wait a second, whoa, stop right there. We don't want to go back there. We were a Russian satellite during the years of the USSR. It's not in our best interest. And they've actually been asking the United States to support them and help them in this. What they don't realize is that, you know, we're 100 yards away flailing and drowning ourselves. We're not in a position to swim over and help them. But these people in the Ukraine, they decided that their government hadn't followed a plan that they deemed to be the surest course for the benefit of the nation as a whole, for the benefit of the people. So they called on their president to resign in massive, peaceful, civil disobedience. They're standing outside in the cold by the thousands, and they're not moving. They're camping there. They're saying, we're not leaving until you do. We've had enough. You don't represent us. You don't stand for us. You don't support us. You're a puppet for someone else. Their elections are rigged. Sound familiar? The intimidation is on to intimidate those people who would stand up for liberty and freedom and their right to self-governance. Does that sound familiar to you? They were actually successful in getting their Supreme Court to order a revote or a complete renewed revote, I should say. But guess what? When the revote was done, Yanukovic's opposition won. He's the president that we're talking about here. But he was still elected president in 2010. What I'm trying to tell you is that it's extraordinarily similar, shadow similar, to the situation that is now occurring here in our nation. Let's not fool ourselves into believing that the electoral process has any integrity. We're going to take a break. I realize I ran over the clock here. We'll be back in 1 second. Sorry, I ran over the clock there. I wasn't paying attention. And I had my alarm turned down. You know, the problem that we're seeing here, or that they're experiencing there, is exactly reminiscent of where we are ourselves. Let's not fool ourselves into believing that our election here for both 2008 and 2012 was not rigged to a certain extent. The risk or the odds of 100% of a precinct voting for one man. Not once, but in literally dozens and dozens and dozens of precincts around the country, are so astronomical, you have a better chance of throwing a lasso around the moon and pulling it down. The truth of the matter is, it's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. And we've been playing this election game for a long time now. For the last 150 almost years, there's been a two-party duopoly. The Republicans and the Democrats. And we've been the ping pong ball being bounced back and forth between their tennis rackets, if you will. What has it gained us? What have we accomplished? We've seen our school systems descend into complete chaos. A recent study that was done showed that Americans are ranked about 28 in terms of overall countries. We are so low on the scales of math and science that we're not even in the top 20. And on history, it's a joke. We're so far down the list, we don't even show up. It's like being on page 7 of a Google search. Nobody ever sees it. Our debt has skyrocketed. This president is responsible for $8 trillion in debt in 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the debt when he took over was $10 trillion. He's added single-handedly $8 trillion to the debt. In the last 5 years, what have we seen all of that money accomplish? Where is it? Where is all that money? With $8 trillion, we should all be driving luxury Mercedes-Benz. We should all be living in Hollywood-style homes. $8 trillion. And the poor are getting poorer. And those that were holding their own are rapidly losing their ability to continue and function. I mean, we're really no longer even in a position where we can reasonably say that things are moving in the right direction. I'm going to do a quick math calc for you here. 8 trillion divided by 300 million people. Every American is $26,666 in the hole in 5 years. Think about that for a minute. You contributed $26,666 on top of the taxes you already pay. Where is it? What have you got to show for it? Even if you divide that over 5 years, that's $5,000 a year. And yet we've seen the income for the average American family drop $2,500 a year. So it hasn't only cost you $5,000 a year, it's cost you $5,000 a year in debt you can't afford. And on top of that, another $2,500 in losses. So we're actually $7,500 a year in the hole since President Obama took office. And now, with Obamacare, we were supposed to save $2,500. In fact, it's turning out that it's going to cost most people an additional $2,500. So with a full-blown implementation of Obamacare, assuming that we don't have to cover any of it with actual debt, which is a lie, you're going to be $10,000 in the hole. yearly. How many of you can afford to throw an additional $10,000 at this problem? We have a police force in our nation that is being militarized in a way that should be shocking and frightening to most Americans. The level of equipment and training and the new mentality that is pervading our law enforcement in this nation is like a creeping cancer. Have you noticed the level of hostility now from law enforcement? Do you not see it? I mean, we're seeing case after case after case, and it's not just that the media is gotten better at reporting this stuff. In fact, they've gotten worse. But we see, unimaginable cases of abuse over the most nonsensical little stuff. I'm going to tell you why that is. Because your police departments are no longer protecting and serving. They are now enforcing. And there's a big difference. They're now enforcing the law on you. They're not there to protect you. And while they tell you they are, that they're keeping you safe, they're keeping you safe while they're putting you in chains. The number of new laws and regulations have so outstripped the average person's ability to keep track with it all that you don't even know when you're breaking the law anymore. And yet there is a zero tolerance policy in play. Well, our founders very clearly told us that if men cannot follow the laws, we are living in a system of tyranny. They didn't know and they hadn't developed the phrase police state by that point in time. They used the term tyranny, but it's the same thing. You see, the problem is that we are rapidly falling into a dictatorship here. And it's about time that Americans began to recognize what's happening around us. Our government is no longer accountable to us. The EPA is about to dump at the beginning of this year, literally, 3 weeks away. They're going to dump on us thousands of new rules and regulations. Thousands of them. And they're only one of thousands of agencies, and they're all doing the same thing. Rules that you're obliged to and required to adhere to. And you don't even know what they are. You didn't even know they were passed. I didn't hear about that. But you're responsible for it. The courts are sitting there in complete, absolute, utter, stunning silence on the one hand, or complete capitulation to an unholy matrimony, an unholy wedding to the executive and the congressional, the legislative, the judiciary. This is the equivalent of a bigamist marriage. It's incestuous. The judiciary's job was to protect you when Congress in the legislative and the executive and the president overreached. And they're no longer doing that. They're now providing cover. The truth of the matter is that we have reached a position in our future where Americans, everyone recognizes that the end is around the corner. No, many don't want to admit it. But you look at the financial picture. You look at what our debt is. You look at the rest of the nations that buy our debt, who are fleeing from us. and are saying the next time we talk about American debt, they give you the old vampire sign. Who's going to buy this continued debt that this president is promulgating? China won't buy it. In fact, China is out there literally, I mean, if you're not aware of what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, it's amazing to me that you're not. They're out there sitting there, whetting their appetite, licking their chops. Are you aware of what China is doing on an international level with us? They're, in one hand, they make demands of us as a nation. And on the other hand, they sit there and tell us what to do. It's a joke. And it's a joke because we're allowing it to continue. We're not stopping it. We're not rejecting it. There are a lot of folks that are very frustrated with where we are in terms of, our overall picture politically. They recognize that we have really kind of fallen down the rabbit hole, if you will. And they don't know what to do. And I get it. They are frightened. They don't know how to turn. They don't know what to think. They're afraid to be targeted. But that should be telling you everything that you need to know. When we are literally living in fear of our government, stop pretending that the adage doesn't apply to you. There are a lot of people out there that are low information folks. I mean, we've all seen them, right? These are people who can't even name the vice president. But they voted. It's amazing. Thomas Jefferson constantly talked about education being the solution. In fact, he said, "Enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppressions of body and mind will vanish like spirits in the dawn of day." He promoted education. Not education, math and science, education of the political scenario around you. Stop being a sheep and be more like a lion. Are you a sheep? Or are you a lion? The truth of the matter is, where we are today is we're almost past the point of no return. Patrick Henry told us, "The liberties of people never were, nor ever will be, secure when the transactions of their rulers may be concealed from them. And yet, everywhere around you is secrecy. Not secrecy on your part. Your secrets are wide open for the world to look at. And the people who mean to rule you. But their secrets are sacrosanct. Nobody's allowed to see the great Oz. No how. The truth is that as we stand now, we've allowed ourselves to be buffaloed and chided and thrown into this position where we don't know where we stand. We don't know what our application should be. We don't know how we should move forward. I posted one of those memes up on Facebook the other day. It says, up until 1913, Americans kept all of their earnings. There was no income tax. Despite this, we still had schools, colleges, roads, vast railroads, streets, subways, the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps, who all had managed to win 8 wars. So tell me again why we the people need to be extorted. The truth is, we are being extorted. And we're being leaned and sucked dry by a government that's utilizing all of those resources to actually enslave you. Alexander the Great said, "I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am, however, afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion." So I'm asking you, are you a lion or are you a sheep? The truth is, every one of us has a circle of influence. Every one of us is a leader, whether we choose to acknowledge or admit that or not. Every one of us has someone who looks to us for some level of insight, some direction, because that's human nature. The question is, what are you telling your followers? What are you telling your congregation? What are you telling your flock? You see, like a ripple in a pond, you don't have to be, the next Martin Luther King who's got millions of followers. You don't have to be Glenn Beck. You've only got to lead your little band. And whether that band is 3 or 3,000 or 3 million or 30 million, it makes no difference. Each of us can and should be effective on our own, self-governing, responsible, with the knowledge and the skill set to lead those people in our circle of influence. Yes, it's going to not be a smooth road. I get it. But how much longer can America stand by idly and allow our nation to descend into tyranny? You see, at some point in time, it's going to get to the point where we're going to have to recognize that we must stand up and fight. Unfortunately, if we continue to sit idly by and allow the power and the strength of the enemy to grow, they will become so immense, so powerful, that our chances of winning in a peaceful way without some kind of a chasm of civil war are that graduated window is closing by the day. You've all heard me use this quote from Winston Churchill many times, and if you're a longtime listener, forgive me for doing it again. But it is so apparent, it's so required, it's so necessary, it's so true. Still, if you will not fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. There may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is absolutely no hope of victory, because it is better to perish than live as slaves. So taking that as a timeline, where are we in that timeline? I mean, if you're not going to fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, now, when are you going to fight? When your victory will be costly? When blood will run? Not a single time in history have people been able to regain freedom and liberty by being passive. It's never happened. Even peace requires activity. It's ephemeral. You have to work for it. It's like smoke. Try and contain it. If you don't exhale it into an enclosed space, it will evaporate. It will be carried away on the wind. Right now, we're in the moment when our victory actually can... Listen, I think we're actually beyond the sure point. He says, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly. I'm not so sure we haven't already passed that threshold. It will be costly. It will be costly to us in a number of ways. Assuming, for argument's sake, that we can do this under a massive peaceful civil disobedience action. It's still going to be costly. It's going to be costly in terms of discomfort, in terms of a change of that which you're accustomed to. Getting out of your comfort zone, as they would say in corporate America. Maybe your food supply isn't going to be quite what you liked it to be. Maybe it's going to take some physical activity and labor that you really don't want to put forth. Maybe it's going to take you being willing to accept the risk that comes with the reward of liberty and freedom. But it is going to cost you something. But if we don't take it up shortly, we're going to be at a point where it doesn't really matter anymore because we've completely lost the opportunity to do this in a reasonable, self-serving fashion. What we're going to end up with is we're going to come to the moment when we're going to have to fight with all of the odds against us and only a precarious chance of survival. And right now, we're somewhere between the sure and not too costly and the precarious chance of survival. We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. And, I think it's important to recognize that when we are in this position, we have to make some hard and fast decisions about what we're going to do. What are we expecting from ourselves? What's going to come out of our activity? Are we going to idly stand by and allow all that we have known to be taken from us, to be left with that which we greatly fear the worst anyway? Or are we going to actually attempt to try to preserve that which we know and was ours in the first place? We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we want to talk a little bit about why you should be finding alternative sources for information. Because what you're being fed right now is propaganda of the worst sort. It is tyrannical in its nature. And it is designed to continue to keep you from feeling empowered. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. Hang on.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Okay. We're back. You know, we're in our third segment of the morning. We're in the midst of a storm here. A literal storm. A snowstorm. Ice storm. But the storm is also raging around us everywhere. And it's raging around us everywhere in every facet of our lives. Those of you who say, I'm not interested in politics, I don't really care about that, I got to tell you, the storm is affecting you. Even though you think you don't have an interest in it, that it doesn't bear down on you. It does. It's affecting all of us equally. And you ignore it at your peril. You've been given and fed a modern-day Trojan horse. You know, it's like poison in your food. And you're so doggone hungry that you're going to eat it anyway, despite the risk. It's like the man in the desert who's dying of thirst, and he finds a pool of water, and there's bones laying all around the pool, and the old sign in there that says, danger, tainted, poison. And he drinks it anyway. It's like the man on board of a rowboat, far out at sea, shipwrecked, alone, no land in sight, no rain, no food, no water. And he hasn't had anything to drink in days. And his throat is parched. And he begins to look at all that water around him. And even though he knows that to take that water in will cause him harm, he does it anyway. The lies that we hear every single day are destroying us. And there's no one in the media who's willing to say to us, stop, don't drink the water. There's very, very few left. The media has so capitulated into being the mouthpiece, the megaphone for this administration, and our decline in political liberty and freedom, and human liberty and freedom, that we, at this stage in the game, you almost can't trust anything that you hear. Not even from me. You've heard me say 1,000,000 times that I don't want you to believe what I say. I want you to go out there and do your own homework, do your own due diligence, seek out information on your own. Don't accept that what I say is some paragon of the truth. My job is only to awaken you and give you that first bite of food. But I don't have any magic crystal ball. I'm willing to look at things, though, as they are, and I'm willing to admit what I see. I'm willing to admit what my eyes see and not pretend that I'm standing there because everyone else wants to try to pretend that the king is not wearing clothes, that the elephant in the room is not standing on our feet. It is. And I'm willing to look at it in truthfulness and say, I see a problem here. But my goal is only to give you the tools and give you the skills and give you the information that should make you hungry to learn more on your own. Frankly, that's what the media is supposed to be doing, and they're not. You know, there's a woman out there, her name is Cheryl Atkinson. And she is a reporter and has been a reporter for many years. And she's probably one of the last few, I should say, true investigative journalists out there. Recently, she works for CBS, by the way, which is, you know, the communist broadcast system as far as I'm concerned. And she's not very well liked over there, but, you know, she's she's been there a long time. She wields some power. I got to tell you, you know, Cheryl Atkinson, she's done a number of investigative journalist stories that really got under the skin of this administration. But lately, she's been paying a price. And this is an example of what's happening in the media across the board. First of all, her computer was hacked on multiple occasions. And CBS actually had to go out there and do some pretty significant forensic research to figure out what had occurred. But somebody's been hacking into her computer. And they didn't steal her credit card information. And they didn't steal her identity. So it wasn't someone who was doing it for profit. That really only leaves, ladies and gentlemen, one culprit. She has been blackballed by this administration because she has been very, very aggressive about pointing out their failures. But lately, she's been being blocked. She's been complaining about restrictions being placed on the media, and rightly so. And the media, of course, you know, has been very, has really ultimately failed to do their job. And now it's becoming apparent to everyone. Everyone's looking at the media and saying, well, why didn't you tell us what was going on here? Just recently, some 25 or 30 different organizations, all media organizations, you know, ABC News, the Associated Press, CBS, CNN, Dow Jones, Fox News, Gannett, all of these companies came forth and they wrote out the National Press Club, and they wrote a letter to Jay Carney, the press secretary at the White House, complaining about the fact that they've been barring access to photographers who cover the White House. Because what the White House has been doing is barring these news media organizations from taking photographs of the president. Instead, he's been using the internal official photographer and then only supplying the media with those images. And, of course, they're always designed to make the president look best. And they're writing this letter to protest the limits that are being placed on their photographers gaining access to the White House. The problem is that they've really missed the mark. What they should be protesting is the fact that the White House is protecting and defending and covering up and blocking them from having access to the information in order to truly report. Unfortunately, the vast majority of them are so embroiled and so wrapped up and so surrounded by their own actions of betrayal to the American people in terms of the job they're supposed to do, that they really don't want to address that because That's something they could have controlled all along. You know, Cheryl Atkinson is what the media should be. She's the kind of person that we look at in the media, and she, you know, epitomizes that which we would consider to be an investigative journalist. She is vociferous and very, very, you know, she is tenacious. She goes out there and really digs deep to find the truth. And she is utterly fearless, which is one of the reasons why, frankly, she is under the gun here. I mean, she really is under the gun. She's actually put out a recent article where she is, you know, really holding this administration accountable. She was the one who came out and beat up very heavily on healthcare.gov. But now they've shut her out. She's the one who was out there digging into the internal emails. She's the one who has broken the news on, you know, what was going on with the EPA and other organizations. She was the one who broke out real deep analysis on the Benghazi issues. But you see, they're going to make an example out of her because they're utilizing intimidation to shut down the media. There's two hands that this White House uses. One is the carrot. And that's the offer that if you say what we want you to say and you do what we want you to do, we're going to reward you potentially with a position within the administration where you can work as a press secretary or you can maybe be some type of a media person. And there's lots of people that want that. I mean, it's a cake job and it comes with a lot of reward. The other hand is holding a stick. It's the old carrot and the stick routine. And the stick side of things is if you get out of line and you talk bad about us, we're going to whack you with this hard, repeatedly. And the truth is, when it comes to Cheryl Atkinson, they actually went down there and hacked into her computer. No one knows who is responsible. But who is responsible didn't do it for monetary gain. She was the one who, you know, talked about Benghazi, Fast and Furious, and Solyndra. And even CBS, her parent, her employer, doesn't like her. Back in 2012, she was hacked into her computer. But if nobody took anything from that computer that could be used as and they did a lot of very heavy forensic investigation to prove that someone had hacked into her computer, not once but multiple times. She's been about, you know, one of the only mainstream reporters out there really, you know, beating the bushes. The other folks out there, listen, even the conservatively loved Fox News is not really out there in many cases. You know, you hear these pundits, the Hannitys and the O'Reillys and the Ingrams and the what have you. But what they do, and if you listen to what they're talking about, it's more like the calming influence of your pastor or your father than it is a investigative journalist breaking the news. And there's something wrong with that. I mean, I get that they want to evaluate and analyze everything to the nth degree. But if they're not really telling you the truth about what's happening, and they constantly give the benefit of the doubt to the other side, well, we don't want to rush to judgment. You don't have to rush to judgment. What you do have to do, if you're going to be in the media and you're going to be intellectually honest, what you do have to do is you have to open up the question and allow it to be asked. And they're not doing that. They're providing cover instead of exposing. And then we wonder why America is low information. I mean, CNN the other day came out and said, you know, the problem is that our audience is falling. And by the way, it has been dramatically. But the problem is that people don't want hard news anymore. They want stories. And so we're going to do more like we did this Blackfish, which was a special they did about orca whales, you know, killer whales. Well, with all due respect, we have reached a point in time in our republic where all of those special interest stories that aren't related to what's going on around us are more distraction than help. But maybe it's intended that way. It's one of the reasons why I want to create an organization that tells a news story, but we're never going to talk about orca. And we're never going to tell you about the cat in the tree. And we're not going to tell you about whether or not some school blocked Christmas songs. That's not what this is about. You know, we don't have their resources. If you can help us, by all means, please step up to the plate because we desperately need it. Everything that I do is voluntary here. I don't get paid to do this, and, you know, what have you. I pay for it out of my pocket. And trust me, all of the effort and time and energy and cost of this doesn't come free. But the truth is, America is thirsting like the man in the boat for truth. They are thirsting for the real motivations behind these people. You don't have to be an investigative reporter to look around you and see what's going on and speak of it with truth. Point out where this is wrong or that's wrong. You know, I did a show the other day about the Second Amendment. How the House the other day, on a voice vote, extended the plastic gun ban. The whatever they call it, Undetectable Firearm Act. Where's the media on that? I mean, they mention it, but none of them are really delving into the true issue, which is, since when does Congress think they have the ability to regulate that which the Constitution tells us they can't? Instead, they hand you a few interviews they do with some congressman who makes it all sound reasonable. It's not reasonable. And none of them are telling you, and now it's going to go to the Senate, and already Chuck Schumer and Dianne Feinstein are scheming and conniving to figure out how they can write amendments to it to send it back. And then it will become law. It's the nose underneath the camel's nose underneath the edge of the tent. It's the foot in the door. If you think I'm over-guesstimating this, if you think that I'm making more out of it than it is, if you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, only time will prove me right or wrong. But I ask you to keep your eyes on this. I ask you to keep your eye on what's going on with this, because I'm telling you right now that this undetectable firearm act will be manipulated. The reason why they want guns out of your hands is because, quite frankly, that's the only means that you have at this point of defending yourself. In our last segment, I read you that quote from Winston Churchill. Still, if you will not fight for the right when you can easily win without bloodshed, like now, if you will not fight when your victory will be sure and not too costly, you may come to the moment when you will have to fight with all the odds against you and only a precarious chance of survival. Without firearms, there may even be a worse case. You may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it will be better to perish than to live as a slave. But you're not told any of that. You're told, be calm. Don't worry. We're watching. We're paying attention for you. We're taking care of this. I got to tell you, folks, we're fast coming to the point where none of this is going to matter. And I point directly at the press as being one of the major... Look, I expect people in power to continue to abuse us for their own personal gain. I expect that. That's what politicians do. That's what people in power do. And they never give it up voluntarily. But I don't expect the watchdog, my watchdog, to lick the hand of the burglar as he approaches the home, hold the door open for him, and show him where the jewels are. Unfortunately, that's where we are. And that's what's happening. Your media, your mainstream media is no longer telling us the truth. They're never telling us news. What they are giving us is pabulum, chalk. They're giving us seawater instead of fresh water. They're leading us to the poison spring in the midst of the desert. And they're saying, go ahead and drink. You've been listening to America's Voice. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to tackle our last story. That's going to be the issue of, if you believe that there is some solution here in 2014 and 2016, well, you may be mistaken. We'll be right back. Return. You're listening to America's Voice. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host this morning. Your host every morning. You know, there's a lot of folks that I hear the talk. I see emails coming in from the show. And by the way, if you'd like to communicate with me, you can. You can contact me by reaching me at via email. I do want to hear your feedback on shows and your input. I don't want you to send me a video that says, hey, watch this. If I watched every video somebody told me to watch on YouTube, I would spend 26 hours a day doing nothing but that. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails every day. If you want to explain to me what your thinking is, or if you want to challenge something I've said on a show, or you want to agree with the show, then put it in writing and take the time to sit down and go through the exercise. Express your thoughts to me in writing. Why? I'm going to tell you. The truth is that, one, it's an exercise in critical thinking, because now you have to translate what you're thinking into a piece of paper and in a relatively brief period of time. You don't have War and Peace to explain to me what you're thinking. And it's a good exercise for you to do. Secondarily, showing me what somebody else believes and has taken the time to put down in YouTube or written in some article only shows me what they believe, but it doesn't tell me what you believe. And one of the primary things I'm telling you constantly, day in and day out and day over and over and over and over again, is don't parrot someone else's opinion, but formulate your own. So formulate your own. And give it to me in writing. Clear. Concise. Well-reasoned, articulate. I'm not grading it. I just don't have the time to spend watching 300 YouTube videos a day, some of them hours in length, to try to glean some kernel of wisdom out of it that you've latched onto. We're all on the cusp of seeing what's happening around us and recognizing that we are in dire trouble as a nation. That our republic is in danger, exigent danger. This isn't future down the road danger like it was in the 90s, like it was in the 80s, like it was in the early 2000s, when we were beginning to start seeing the smoke. But now the house is afire, and we're looking for an exit. And a lot of the email I get are related to an exit that is constituted by a savior, a knight in shining armor, riding up on a shiny steed. And I got to tell you, you're missing the point here. If you're expecting the military to be the pivot point, the initiator of some kind of a stop to what we see going on around us, you're sorely mistaken. One, it's not even a constitutional option for us to accept. And you've heard me say this before. Our Constitution prohibits the military from doing exactly what you're hoping that they will have the courage to do because you don't. Well, they're trained for it. They're also trained to subjugate you. You want proof? Look at your local police force, which no longer has to serve and protect on the side of their car, but now has the word law enforcement. Big difference. What's happened to the helpful policeman who used to be the neighborhood friend? That's what you get when you wrap the military into local police force. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. If you were ever to go into a foreign nation and see what militaries do, you wouldn't want this anymore. The truth is, there is no shining knight. There is only us. And it's time that we picked up the tools that are necessary for us to take back our nation. You know, everywhere you see these constant things that outrage you. I mean, I read a story the other day about how illegals and immigrants, young immigrants, are storming the offices of Republicans in the Congress. trying to force them through intimidation, frankly, to approve amnesty. So gangs of illegals storm the offices of Congress. They're here illegally. They have no right to hang their hat upon. They have no skin in the game. They don't know our culture. They don't know what made this country great. But they want us to remold ourselves into their image. And they demand something for nothing. Yet we're Americans who have everything to lose. We have every right to demand that we have the right to be self-governing, self-reliant, left alone, frankly, to do the best that we can do with our abilities and make it on a system of merit and hard work and effort, without intervention, without winners and losers being chosen for us. We have everything to lose, and we have a long-standing God-given right to defend ourselves. And yet we sit there really waiting for some white knight to rise up and ride up to us in shining armor on some steed with justice emblazoned across his side. But meanwhile, you're expecting that knight to be whom? Our generals? Our military? Look, for the last 150 years, we've been batted back and forth like a tennis ball between Republican and Democrat. We've watched these people in power from both parties systematically shred this country down to its bare roots. We've been stripped of everything. We haven't given them the shirt off our back. They've taken it. But I got to tell you, to sit there and expect that the military can do what you're afraid and unwilling to do, and that at the end of the day that they're going to hand it all back to you to do exactly what you don't have the training, the fortitude, or quite frankly, the experience. And when I say experience, I don't mean the experience to run a government. I mean the experience of having the courage and the knowledge that comes from the fact that you did it and took it back yourself. And now you're entitled to hold on to it. And it's something you're going to be willing to fight for. If you're expecting the military to step up and say, here you go, we kicked him out for you. Let me tell you something. Your mind is so polluted with what you've been ingrained with and indoctrinated with for the last 150 years. It's like handing a brand new driver a Maserati. He's going to wreck it because he has no respect for it. He has no experience with it. You wouldn't hand a monkey a fully loaded machine gun with the safety off, would you? Anywhere you've seen military intervene, and I'm going to use Egypt as a perfect example, it becomes just another tyrant. So if that's what you're thinking, if you're believing for a moment that some kind of military intervention is the solution to this problem, it tells me, it proves to me that you're not ready. That the pain has not become great enough to force you to choose the unknown over what you hate. Human beings don't change because it's difficult. They will sit there and accept over and over and over, the abuses and the tyranny, because they're afraid of the unknown. It's why people will stay in an abusive relationship. It's why an abused child loves that parent, constantly hoping that it's going to get better. It's why the battered wife stands there and protects her husband. Well, he beat me up because I got him mad. Shake off the victimhood. That's what you're doing. You're wearing it like a mantle. You're like a herd of elephants who stand there and shy away from one little mouse. You don't recognize the power that we have. The truth of the matter is, we cannot expect someone else to rise up and solve our problem for us. Yes, they're Americans too, in the military, and they're part of the fabric of our nation. But to expect them to rise up and do the dirty job that you yourself have allowed to accumulate and have become literally accepting of will be no solution at all. The truth is that until you clean your own home, you're never going to be willing to continue to keep it that way. If someone else comes in and cleans up after you all the time, if someone comes in and mollycoddles you, why should I bother? You know, Americans are like that show I've seen once or twice, and I never watch regular television, but I know it's out there. It's called Hoarders. And they portray these people who live in these, horrific conditions where they've got homes that are literally piled, 6 and 8 feet high with just garbage. It's unbelievable, right? They got a path that they have to walk through in order to get from room to room. They sleep in a chair even though they've got 3 bedrooms, but the 3 bedrooms are so packed with garbage they can't even get in the door. But you know something? It didn't start that way. They didn't live their entire lives that way. They weren't born that way. That grew over time. And if you were to take that hoarder out of that environment and say, listen, this house is a dangerous place for you to be, but there's an empty house right next door, and we're going to move you over there. It wouldn't be 6 months or 8 months before they were right back to exactly where they were before. Just different junk, but garbage nonetheless. And I'm here to tell you, America, if you think that you can solve this problem that we have allowed to grow up around us without the understanding of how we got there, what we allowed to go wrong, and the definitive courage to make sure that we continue on the right path, will be no different than the hoarder who was moved out of the disaster and into a fresh, clean home, only to have it look just like the last one in a relatively short period of time. We're not used to making our own decisions. We're not used to standing up for what we know to be right. A lot of it's been fostered upon us by the media. And a lot of it is intimidation, quite frankly. Everyone's afraid. There was a recent poll by WorldNet Daily, and it suggested that up to 79% of Americans polled there was only 822 people. But, I mean, all polls are relatively small. They're usually 1,000 or somewhere in that number. But up to 79% of the people that they polled in this thing supported military intervention to remove President Obama from office. If that's what you're actually thinking, let me ask you something. Are you not then that, have you not become that which you hate? You know, it's not the military's duty and obligation to bear this, to carry this weight for us. We are the ones who have allowed this to happen. In fact, that military is supposed to serve us. And if we think for a moment that that kind of a solution will bring to bear a benefit that will, in the long term, you are not capable of wielding the power because you have not yet learned the weight, the import of carrying that weight and power. I got to tell you, it's a definite conundrum we're in. And it's a fearful place. You see, this is our problem. It's our responsibility. We've allowed this to happen. And there is no savior for us, but we ourselves. We've made this problem. We must fix it. We must take the responsibility to stand up and do the hard work that's going to be required in order to put us back on some direction that makes sense for us. Expecting someone else to step in and save us is more of exactly what we've been doing for the last 100 years that's allowed us to fall into this position in the very first place. Abdicating our responsibility to be responsible for ourselves. Abdicating our responsibility to be the watchdogs of our own safety, our own freedom, our own liberty. Abdicating our responsibility to hold our government in check. Well, you think the military is going to be able to step in and save you from yourself? It's one of the reasons why I advocate massive civil disobedience, and I'll tell you why. Because the lesson learned during that period, whether 30 million Americans had to camp out in Washington for 3 days or 3 hours or 30 days or 3 years, the lesson that we would learn is the pain of doing that is so great we would never allow it to happen again. Not in our generation. That's what our founders did. They lived through a war that was so horrific, that was so destructive. They gained so much insight into their own ability, their own needs, their own desires, their own best interest, that they sat down and formulated this thing that changed the world. Because no one had ever sat down and written something like the U.S. Constitution. And they were so scarred by their experience that they were determined to never let it happen again. And they gave us everything that we needed as a tool to preserve it so it wouldn't happen to us. And yet, in typical human nature, we've failed. We've allowed that which we knew to be against our best interest to happen anyway. And I'm going to tell you, America, there is no easy fix for this. If you think there is, if you think just going to an election and voting in November of 2014 is going to solve things, you're misinformed. If you think 2016 is going to take the presidency out of the hands of Obama and put it into the hands of somebody new, all you're doing is trading one tyrant and dictator for another. And I don't care which party that particular tyrant or dictator represents. The truth is, they're not the problem. We are. We're the problem because we are allowing ourselves to be willing slaves, willingly ruled. We're cowering in fear instead of standing up for our own abilities, our own rights. You're alone. The bully's in front of you. There is no big brother going to come up behind you and save you. You're either going to fight or you're going to go down. The question is, where do you stand? Are you willing to pay the hard price that we should have been paying all along? But we've procrastinated about it for 75 years. We've procrastinated it for the last 100. Now the time is, the bills come due. And we can't pretend that it's not going to come due any longer. It's here. And it's going to be up to us to figure out, what do we do next? But I can promise you one thing. Thinking that somebody else is going to save us, ride up as our hero, some superhero who's going to have the power to vanquish our enemy and put us in power, won't be long and we'll be right back here again. Like the hoarder who's been moved to the clean home next door. We'll surround ourselves with our own trash until that place is no longer fit to live either. But if we clean our house ourselves, if we step up and say, I've had enough of living like this, and I'm going to take this trash out, then we will have a respect for what we've earned. There is no easy fix here, folks. The only other alternative is, you can continue to live here thinking that it doesn't really matter, that this doesn't affect you. Okay. That's your loss. But it does matter. And it does affect you. And it doesn't just affect you. It affects your wife. It affects your husband. It affects your children. It affects your mother. It affects your father. It affects your grandchildren. It affects the children who will spring from you that you don't even know. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. I'd love to hear your feedback. Please feel free to contact me via email. You can send me email to mike@americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find our Facebook page. Please like that. You can go to facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can find our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. And if you wouldn't mind, please go to our new Spreaker application. It's Spreaker, like speaker with an R, Spreaker.com/America's Voice Now, and follow.